This is a test. My name is George McAndrews.
My name is Doug Carlson.
My name is Doyl Taylor.
My name is Kent Carter.
My name is James Cherney.
My name is Douglas Polk.
My name is Bill Tabor. This completes the test.
We're back on the record at 3:59 on tape 3.
Mr. Taylor, when you helped draft the position statement on chiropractic for the House of Delegates, did you debate whether or not you should say it is the opinion of the American Medical Association or whether or not it is the opinion of the medical profession, and then follow it up with the statement?
I don't recall any debate on it at all.
Do you remember that the statement said it is the opinion of the medical profession?
Yes.
Okay. Did the American Medical Association purport to speak for the medical profession?
It certainly meant to convey the consensus of the medical profession. If you're talking about in the context of this statement.
This is the 1966 statement.
The 1966 statement. And was the, would it have lost something, in your opinion, to have said it is the opinion of the American Medical Association?
Didn't even enter my mind.
All right. Plaintiff's Exhibit 253C appears to be a response from Edwin J. Holman to a Mr. G.F. Cohen of November 18, 1967, relating to the issue of consultation with a chiropractor. Have you ever seen that document before?
I saw it in the exhibits that I reviewed over the weekend.
All right. Does that reflect, in your judgment, the AMA's position that it was unethical for a medical physician to consult with a chiropractor?
It says the AMA's Principles of Medical Ethics says that it is a physician should practice a method of healing founded on a scientific basis, and he should not voluntarily associate professionally with anyone who violates this principle. This is the opinion of the American Medical Association on what is ethical. What is ethical is determined by the mores of society at the time, the mores of the medical profession and society at that time. At least the bulk of it in the AMA's opinion was that they should associate only with those who have scientific knowledge of the practice of medicine.
And that letter, in effect, tells them it is unethical to consult with a chiropractor. Was that the question being answered?
If that's the question you're asking, the AMA could not, in my judgment, nor Ed Holman individually, tell this man what he could or couldn't do at any time.
No, I didn't ask whether he could or could not do it. The question was, what provision makes it unethical to consult with a chiropractor? Is that what the question is in the first paragraph?
And it says why. It says a physician should practice a method of healing founded on a scientific basis, and he should not voluntarily associate professionally with anyone who violates this principle.
All right.
The principles of medical ethics state flatly at that time, I believe, that chiropractic is a cult.
All right. Did you ever attend any medical society workshops where Dr. Sabatier talked?
Yes.
Did you ever hear Dr. Sabatier use the term rabid dog or killer with respect to chiropractors?
Not to my knowledge.
All right. Did you attend a chiropractic workshop in Lansing, Michigan in May of 1973? Forget the date. Have you ever been to a chiropractic workshop?
Yes.
When were you at a chiropractic workshop in Michigan?
I was at a chiropractic workshop in Michigan, but I can't tell you when it was.
All right. Let me hand you Plaintiff's Exhibit 1288, and I ask you if you've ever seen that before.
think this is a report produced by the,
Dr. Gascoigne
from Michigan.
from Michigan, reporting on the MSMS chiropractic workshop in the speech of Dr. Sabatier.
I have never seen this document before,
All right.
to my knowledge.
Would you go over to the second page, please?
Yes.
Circled, apparently the copy I brought with me are my work notes, and they're circled. They certainly weren't circled in the original, but it's useful here to focus. Referring to Dr. Sabatier, he says he feels that rabid dogs and chiropractors fit into about the same category. And then the next one, he was asked specifically how he approached the problem of someone asking what he felt about their going to a chiropractor. He said his answer was quite simple. He said he felt chiropractors were nice people, but that they killed people. Now, did you ever hear Dr. Sabatier express those sentiments in your presence at a meeting of the Committee on Quackery?
Not at a meeting of a committee on Quackery or anywhere else.
All right, now you said earlier today that you referred to chiropractors as killers.
I did not refer to them as killers.
All right, had you heard anyone refer to them as killers?
I never have heard anybody refer to them as killers.
All right.
And certainly I didn't refer to them as killers. And I resent your saying that I said that chiropractors were killers.
I'm sorry, my recollection, I'll stand corrected on whatever it was that you said earlier.
So we'll, I don't think you represented that chiropractors were killers. I stated something different.
All right.
You may have asked if chiropractors were killers.
Yes. All right, down at the bottom, he said he also feels that it is very important to point out to members of the medical profession that it is considered nothing less than totally unethical to refer a patient to a chiropractor for any purpose whatsoever. Did you hear Dr. Sabatier ever express that opinion?
No.
Did you ever tell anyone that it was unethical to refer a patient to a chiropractor?
I may have told them that the principles of medical ethics proscribed voluntary professional association with a chiropractor, and this would be within the context of that principle of
Referrals and consultations would
Yes.
be? All right.
Yes.
And you used the term proscribed. What does proscribed mean to you?
Proscribed means you should not do it, in our opinion.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you can't do it.
Okay, and in this context, it was in the opinion of the medical profession. Was that correct?
Right.
Okay.
In which context? 1283?
In the context of
The
Committee
Sabatier
on-
speech?
Yes.
He also feels that it is very important to point out to members of the medical profession that it is considered nothing less than totally unethical to refer a patient to a chiropractor for any purpose whatsoever.
Yes.
This is what some other reporter has
I think
relative-
anybody can say anything he wants to say.
All right.
Okay. I don't know whether Dr. Sabatier said that or not. I have grave doubts that he ever said any of this stuff.
All right. Do you know if, excuse me, well, it was the AMA's position that it was unethical to voluntarily associate professionally with it, for any medical physician to voluntarily associate professionally with any chiropractor, wasn't it?
It was the AMA, one of the AMA's guidelines was that it was unethical. You can interpret what the AMA says any way you want
All right.
if you're a physician.
Were you concerned that most medical physicians were apathetic about the problems of chiropractic?
I am sure your statement is incorrect.
Most medical physicians were not apathetic?
Right.
Did you think that there was an abundance of lethargy and total disinterest on the part of most medical physicians about chiropractic?
No.
All right. Would you look at the last paragraph attributed to Dr. Sabatier by Dr. Gascoigne? He said, another point he mentioned was the importance of some mention to young physicians in medical school about the hazard of chiropractic. He feels that if the young physician in his formative years can be made aware of the problem and be made to see that it is a true health problem, that it will go a long way toward changing the attitude of organized medicine or the practicing physician toward chiropractic. He feels there is an abundance of lethargy and total disinterest on the part of the individual physician regarding his chiropractic neighbor and practice of chiropractic. He feels that until the physician is interested and stimulated to do something, that the chiropractic menace will continue to grow and flourish. Did you ever hear Dr. Sabatier express any sentiments like that?
No.
Were you at all concerned that you had to stimulate interest to get the physicians to do something about chiropractors?
I never had any problem getting physicians stimulated. Wherever we had meetings, we had overflow crowds.
All right.
I'm not concerned about it. I never was.
Okay, and then do you know why the Committee on Quackery was formed?
Because it was necessary to protect the public health,
Okay.
in the AMA's opinion.
And to stimulate interest on the
That
part
was
of
not a
medical
part-
physicians?
That was not a part of any mission that I've ever known of.
Right. Were the principles of medical ethics directed toward the public, do you know?
Certainly not.
They were directed toward medical physicians, is that correct?
Correct. And medical organizations.
And was the AMA hopeful that the inclusion, specific mention of chiropractic under Section 3 of the Principles of Medical Ethics would result in some action on the part of, or inaction on the part of medical physicians?
I'll object to the form. How can you determine if some group was hopeful?
Well, answer the question anyway.
As I have testified 2 or 3 times, the purpose of that, the real purpose of that, of the need for that specific statement on chiropractic was so that we could have a tool with which to work with other organizations outside the House of Medicine.
And do you use the...
I don't think that it was necessary to tell a physician what chiropractic stood for.
Okay, do you use the Judicial Council opinions and reports to work with groups outside of medicine?
Do I?
Yes.
I don't work with anybody at all now.
I know. Did you, at the time you were head of the Department of Investigation of the AMA,
Occasionally.
would you send the Judicial Council opinions and reports to non-medical groups?
I probably never sent the opinions and reports to anybody.
All right. Do you know if Mr. Holman did?
I'm sure he did.
Did he? Do you know if he sent them to non-medical groups?
I don't know. Every physician got it.
Every physician got it.
I believe, I believe it was a part of their dues.
Because that's the reason the Judicial Council opinions and reports exists, is it not? To go to the medical physicians?
The medical physicians are the AMA. It's sharing information with your peers. It's as simple as that.
All right. Did you ever take the position that one of the reasons why a medical staff of a hospital should resist efforts of chiropractors to obtain hospital privileges was because it is unethical for a physician to have any professional relationship with a chiropractor?
I may have, but that wasn't the primary reason.
All right, well, let me see. Plaintiff's Exhibit 267, it's written by you to a Dr. Arthur Bernstein, dated May 19th, 1966. And it is it the first reason that you list?
Yes.
Okay, do you know why you listed it number 1?
I have no reason to list it number
Was
one.
the first one
or-
that came to mind?
may have been the easiest one to put down as number 1. There happened to be 5 there and 18 points on the next group.
Do you know of any medical physicians that own hospitals?
I don't know of any. There may be some.
But that would be the exception, would it not?
I would think so.
Are hospitals generally owned by religious institutions, public bodies, or private corporations, to your knowledge?
I have I do not have the ability to answer that question at this time because the situation has changed so drastically in the last, since I left the AMA. I don't know what the situation is insofar as ownership and operation of hospitals is concerned.
Okay. As long as you were with the AMA, it was your understanding that chiropractors were making some efforts to get into hospitals. Is that correct?
Yes.
Let me hand you Exhibit 253B and ask you, you're shown as having received a blind copy of it. It's from Edwin J. Holman. Let me ask you if that reflects the AMA's position that it was unethical for a medical physician to serve on a committee assigned to work on recommended bylaws, rules, and regulations of a medical staff with a chiropractor.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Question, let me hand you Exhibit 253B and ask you, you are shown as having received a blind copy of it. It is from Edwin J. Holman. Let me ask you if that reflects the AMA's position that it was unethical for a medical physician to serve on a committee assigned to work on recommended bylaws, rules, and regulations of a medical staff with a chiropractor.
That is not what this letter says.
All right. Let me hand you Plaintiff's Exhibit 255. Did the AMA and the American Hospital Association have a joint statement regarding medical staff membership that you utilized from time to time in responding to questions regarding chiropractors?
What are you showing 255 for?
It's a letter from his subordinate, Mr. Monahan, and the last paragraph on the first page refers to a joint statement with the American Hospital Association.
And your question is what?
Did you utilize, do you have any recollection of a joint statement of the AMA with the American Hospital Association regarding hospital medical staff membership?
I have absolutely no recollection of any joint statement we ever had with the American Hospital Association, but this quote's from, Mr. Monahan quotes it. First, he quotes from the AMA House of Delegates. And then he quotes from what he calls a photocopy of a joint statement by the AMA and the American Hospital Association approved by the AMA Board of Trustees and the House of Delegates at the AMA Annual Convention in July this year. Now, I have no idea what he means by a joint statement by the AMA and the AHA. I have never seen the statement before. Whether they work together to reached that statement, and the AMA presented it to its House of the board presented it to its House of Delegates.
All right, let me just ask you, in the photocopies of number 4, it says page 132 of hospital accreditation references. You know what that was?
I have no idea.
All right. Now, I hand you plaintiff's...
I got it.
Off the record?
No.
I hand you Plaintiff's Exhibit 301. It's a letter from, a memorandum from Roger G. Olin to you, dated March 12, 1974, entitled Chiropractic and Medicare. Earlier today, I asked you if the article entitled Right and Duty of Hospitals to Exclude Chiropractors was motivated by chiropractic's inclusion in Medicare. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Did you receive that letter on or about the date indicated?
I have no recollection of receiving it. There's no stamp showing a receipt, but it is addressed to me and is allegedly from Roger Olin. I have no knowledge of anything that's in the memorandum.
All right. All right. Plaintiff's Exhibit 1410. Earlier today, you said you thought that you became aware of the compromise of your documents, confidential documents, about 6 months before you left the AMA.
I was guessing.
All right. Let me hand you Exhibit 1410 and see if that refreshes your recollection as to the general period of time when you first found that your documents had been compromised.
It certainly does.
Right? Does that indicate to you that the Trevor book was copyrighted in 1972?
Yes.
And did you...
That's falsely copyrighted, incidentally.
Well, that's fine.
There was no copyright application, no copyright granted.
All right. Did you find out about it in late 1972?
The book?
Yes.
I must have.
Thank you.
And I obviously was in error when I said we discovered the theft of documents was in the last 6 months of my period there. I was probably 1972.
All right. Very quickly, Plaintiff's Exhibit 177. There's attached Plaintiff's Exhibit 176. These were produced by the AMA. Are these the documents? I think there's also 175, which is the minutes of the Committee on Quackery for June 18, 1972. Are these generally the materials that you were, you mentioned you knew about the CW Post turn down of the chiropractic college's request for assistance?
Some of this is, I'm not going to take the time to read all of this, but some of this I don't believe I've seen before, but generally speaking, I would agree with you that these are the types of documents that we had that informed us of the problem at CW Post.
176 in there?
Yes, I think so. Yes. And although you said you didn't remember Moorhead, let me hand you Exhibits 452, 455, and 456, and see if they refresh your recollection about an issue at Moorhead relating to a pre-professional program for chiropractic. And let me also throw in Plaintiff's Exhibit 457.
This is not refreshing my recollection one iota. I have never seen one line of all of these documents that you've thrown at me.
That's fine. They came from Dr. Stevens. I
I've never seen them.
All right. Then I'd like to show you Plaintiff's Exhibit 251, stamped confidential. It's a letter from William Monahan to Martin Kaplan, dated February 3rd, 1969. And produced by the AMA. Have you ever seen that document before? I'm primarily interested in the third paragraph, I believe it is, where Mr. Monahan says that you contacted almost 600 groups to get them to make some form of statement on chiropractic.
You asked me that question this morning.
I know that.
And I will give you the same answer. I would suggest to you that his estimate of 600 is approximately 50% exaggerated.
Was he responsible for making some of the contacts?
He was responsible for doing the mailing as I requested. I signed every letter that went out of there that invited or suggested he might want to consider adopting a policy statement or endorsing the AMA's statement.
So while Mr. Monahan says it was almost 600, it's your recollection it was approximately 300?
I can't believe it's 600. I don't know how many medical specialties there are. Bill, can you help me? Every member of the National Health Council, and I think there are 68 organizations in the National Health Council. I would guess there are about 60 medical specialties. That's 120. I can't believe it. 600 would be an answer. I still believe that 300 is a more accurate statement.
All right, I'd like to hand you exhibits 108, 108A, and 108C. Maybe one missing.
I would like to add that I wish we had 600 instead of 300 as endorsing our statement.
You would have liked all the help you could get, right?
Anybody who wants to be alerted to the situation, that's all we were trying to do.
Well, Plaintiff's Exhibit 108, 108A, and 108C, they involve Otha, Linton, and Bill Monahan in September and October of 1968. Was the American College of Radiology one of the groups that you tried to get to issue a statement on chiropractic?
Objection to form and foundation.
Well, I think you're, I happen to be a witness, but his objection is so valid. I did not try to get them to do anything. I suggested to them that they might consider endorsing the AMA statement or adopting one of their own. Now, if that's asking them to do something to adopt a policy statement, then I'm wrong.
All right, I'll adopt your words.
All right.
And was that the correspondence with the American College of Radiology that reflected whatever it is that was done by your group?
I'm sure it is, because Bill was a personal friend of both Linton's, who at that time was with the American College of Radiology and I think was maintaining an office in Washington although he spent a lot of time at their headquarters, which then were in Chicago.
All right.
Is there a 108B?
I just said, I don't know where it is. I'm sure there must be. But it isn't in that group. Now, Plaintiff's Exhibit 206. Is this your letter to the American Cancer Society asking them, or even in closing, a possible ACS policy statement on chiropractic?
Again, I resent what you are putting on this record when you say I am sending them a draft of a policy statement without some explanation. This letter explains why they asked for a draft.
All right, well, whatever it is, you sent them a draft, did you not?
At their request.
All right.
Yes. Excuse me.
What did they do? Call you and say, we've heard about the chiropractic issue, could you send us a draft of a statement?
I had sent to the American Cancer Society, there was a physician then who was running whatever department I was dealing with, who was later killed in an automobile accident between that time and the time of that letter. We had sent to him a copy of our policy statement with the same letter we sent to all of the other medical specialties and allied healthcare groups such as the American Cancer Society. A letter suggesting, sending them a copy of the AMA's policy statement and suggesting to them that they might want to endorse this statement or adopt a policy statement of their own concerning chiropractic.
And then he telephoned you?
This was somehow, it must have been by telephone, or there was a group that both he and I were members. It may have been in a conversation, but he asked me to submit a draft. You will see the results. You have the result.
All right. How often did you submit drafts of policy statements to any of these 300 or 600 groups?
I think this is the only organization that asked for a draft, and the only one in which I drafted.
All right. Now, Plaintiff's Exhibit 208. Is that a society that just adopted the AMA policy statement at your request?
It was not at our request. We suggested that they consider doing it. They did consider doing and did endorse the AMA's, approve the AMA's policy statement.
All right. Well, I don't want to
like
argue,
your
I don't want to
language.
quibble, but here's your language. I can think of nothing the American Cancer Society could do that would be more important in fighting cancer quackery than to adopt such a statement and give it wide public distribution. Is that acceptable to you as what the statement you made to the American Cancer Society?
Certainly, I did make that.
All right.
Spears Hospital was treating cancer patients, chiropractic hospital. SPWERIS.
Was it your understanding that chiropractors were treating dental problems?
No.
Do you know why you sent the statement to the American Dental Association?
Yep.
Why?
They're friends of ours, and I wanted them to know that I wanted to include them.
All right. They issued a statement saying it is unethical for a dentist to delegate to a chiropractor any services related to a dental case.
Right.
Did that bring a smile to your face?
Yes.
And
I also thought that with a remote possibility that some chiropractor might say, I can cure your root canal problem
all right. Plaintiff's Exhibit 209.
by massaging your spine.
All right. So you went to all your friends, is that correct?
I happen to say that the people at the ADA, the American Dental Association, which was just down the street from the AMA, were friends of ours. Of course, I said we've gone to every medical specialty.
Were all the medical specialties friends of yours?
No.
Which ones weren't?
I don't know.
All right.
I don't know people in all the medical specialties.
All right. Plaintiffs Exhibit 210 from the American Broncho-Esophagological Association, dated June 15, 1967. Is that another?
Esophageal.
No, it's not. It's,
You're right, it's esophagological.
right.
That's another one.
That's another one.
Right.
All right.
That's just a matter of going down all of the lists of medical specialties and sending them our policy statement and making the suggestion that they consider it, that they consider endorsing it or adopting a policy statement of their own.
And
This organization was on that list and received that letter.
all right, that's fine. This is the statement of policy of the American Cancer Society. Plaintiffs Exhibit 211, is it not?
Yes.
And in the handwriting, whose handwriting is that at the top?
Bing Blasingame, I believe.
All right, and it's addressed to you. And
Yes.
what does
No,
it
it's Bert Howard's.
Okay,
Does
Bert
it
Howard
say that?
addressed to you, and
Right.
what does it say?
Use as you think appropriate. This resulted from recent telephone calls.
All right.
Would you like an explanation of what this was all about?
Please, if you, yeah.
Okay.
that sounds
As I
good.
told you, the doctor with whom I had dealt was killed in an automobile accident while he was on a bus. Automobile hit the bus and killed him. His materials were divided up among other officials of the American Cancer Society, and Dr. Cooney took over this responsibility and talked to, I believe, Dr. Blasingame. And Dr. Blasingame talked to me and asked me what I had done, and I showed him a copy of the draft statement that had been requested and that I had sent, and he said he had talked to Dr. Cooney about it, and they were going to send a statement. This is what resulted.
All right.
That's the whole chronology of that statement.
All right. And did you ask, or do you know if anyone at the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons was asked to adopt a statement?
Yes.
Do you know if they did?
They weren't asked to. We suggested to them that they might want to consider doing it.
And do you know if Dr. Stevens worked with Mr. Youngerman in your office to draft a statement for the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons?
They did not work together in my office to draft such a statement.
Did they work together anywhere?
I assuming that you're assuming a lot of things which are in error. Dr. Stevens is an orthopedic surgeon. He was a member of that organization. He attended their meeting in San Francisco and introduced this as a resolution to be adopted by the orthopod, and they did.
And did Mr. Youngerman go to that meeting in San Francisco with him?
I don't think he went, no, I'm sure they did not go together, but I'm sure they did meet in San Francisco.
Do you know why was Mr. Youngerman on vacation?
I don't know. He wasn't on duty, let's put it that way.
All right. Do you know if the American College of Radiology ultimately adopted a statement?
Yes, it did.
And do you know what the statement was?
No.
Okay.
I couldn't give it to you verbatim.
Do you know if the American Hospital Association adopted a statement after your mailing?
I believe it did, but I'm not certain.
Okay. Do you know if the American College of Physicians did?
I believe so.
Do you know if the American College of Surgeons did?
I'm sure they did.
Did you ever talk with C. Rollins Hanlon at the American College of Surgeons about the subject of chiropractic?
I'm sure I have.
Okay. Do you know what the subject was?
From here to there.
All right. Somewhere in between here and there, did you tell them that it was your goal to contain and eliminate chiropractic as a recognized health care provider?
I don't think I needed to tell him because he was a strong supporter of anything we were trying to do with chiropractic, because he thought the same as we did, that chiropractic was a major menace to the public health.
All right.
Dr. Hanlon was probably the strongest supporter the AMA policy statement ever had.
All right. Now, since it was such a major menace to the public health, do you know why the 50 state legislatures in Congress didn't eliminate it?
Do I know why?
Yeah. Yes. That's the question.
I assume it's the political clout and pocketbook of the chiropractor.
Okay. And so in the absence of
We lost.
You lost. But did you stop your actions?
Our actions were on May 1st, 1975, the committee was put on hold and the department was abandoned.
Was that after investigation started from the documents that had been made public?
There was no cause for the actions that were taken by the AMA on May 1st that are involved with anything we're talking about or ever have talked about. The AMA was in a financial bind of no uncertain term. Mine department was one of many.
Was because your department was low priority?
It was a high-priced department.
Was that the Department of Investigation or
Yes.
the Committee on Quackery?
Department of Investigation.
Okay. Was the Committee on Quackery terminated?
It was put on hold.
It was put on hold?
It held no meetings.
All right. And was that a high-priced committee?
Our budget was a considerable budget.
Can you tell me what the budget was?
I don't remember.
Was it $10 million?
I'm sorry, I don't remember, and I'm not sure that your question is appropriate.
All right. Who was Ralph Lee Smith?
Ralph Lee Smith was a freelance writer when I first knew him. The last I knew, he was head of journalism department, Howard University.
All right. Did the AMA use him as a freelance writer from time to time?
Particular form?
Answer anyway, please.
The AMA did not use Ralph Lee Smith in any sense of the word of use Ralph Lee Smith. Ralph Lee Smith submitted to Today's Health numerous articles, some of which were published. Ralph Lee Smith was a frequent, by frequent I mean several times a year, 3 or 4 times a year, visitor to our department to research our files for materials on all types of health quackery. He did an excellent job on everything that, as far as I'm concerned, as a former newspaper editor, and I think I'm a fairly decent judge of what's good and bad.
Did the AMA ever employ Ralph Lee Smith as a freelance writer?
No.
Did the AMA ever guarantee sales of his books?
No.
Did the AMA ever give advance purchase orders for 5,000 copies of his book?
No.
Okay. Did the Ralph Lee Smith write for the AMA?
Ralph Lee Smith wrote for Ralph Lee Smith for pay and the sale of products that he produced.
Did the AMA pay him?
For these products?
Yes.
Certainly. If Today's Health printed one of Ralph Lee Smith's articles on cancer quackery or whatever, or chiropractic or anything else, he got paid for it.
All right. Plaintiff's Exhibit 542, the Committee on Quackery minutes of September 7, 1966. On page 3, it states, manuscript on Parker School of Practice Building. The committee agreed that legal questions prompted a different approach to this expose. It was suggested that Ralph Lee Smith, a freelance writer who had previously written for the AMA, be hired to attend the chiropractic practice building course on his own and write a story on his attendance for Today's Health. Did the AMA hire Ralph Lee Smith?
No.
Okay. Is that a misstatement?
No,
Here,
that's
would
not
you
a
please read The second
Answer
sentence,
your question.
That's
Yes.
not a misstatement.
all right, would you read the second sentence of that paragraph, please? The middle of the page.
It was suggested. That sentence,
Yes.
What's the question, please?
I would like to read the full statement.
Would you please?
All right, I'd like to read the full sentence.
Please.
Instead of, again, leaving parts out. It was suggested that Ralph Lee Smith, a freelance writer who had previously written for the AMA, be hired and attend the chiropractic practice building course on his own and write a story on his attendance for today's health.
Okay.
The committee agreed such an approach would have greater impact than the manuscript in its present form.
Okay. Who hired Ralph Lee Smith?
Nobody hired Ralph Lee Smith.
But the committee recommended that he be hired?
That's right.
And did he refuse to be hired?
No. There was never an attempt made to hire him in the sense of his becoming employed by the AMA. Ralph Lee Smith was encouraged to go to the Parker practice building course.
Who paid his expenses?
As far as I know, he did. The only assurance that he had was that the probability that, from me, that his sale of a good article on the practice building course would be a cinch.
Would be a cinch?
Cinch.
And that's because the AMA would buy it.
Today's Health magazine, published by the AMA.
Well, Today's Health is an AMA publication.
Yes.
All right. So you guarantee, you
No.
told him it would be a cinch.
I said it would be a cinch.
All right. Do you remember what you paid him?
I didn't pay him anything, as far as I can remember. And I don't know what Today's Health paid him. They paid by the word or by the page or whatever. I've forgotten what their rates were. They're like any other magazine.
Some lawyers get paid that way.
All right. For how long a period of time did Ralph Lee Smith write for the AMA?
He did not write for the AMA. He wrote articles and sold them to the AMA.
Well, for how long a period of time did he do that?
He was doing it when I came there.
In
so
1965?
In 1965. And probably for another 10 years or so, or maybe approximately that.
And you were satisfied with his production?
I certainly was. I had no control over his production.
Well, if he wanted to have a cinch of a sale, he didn't want to...
I was trying to convince him that this was a good story, and he bought it. And if it wasn't a good story, you can't read.
All right. Did anyone at the AMA ever tell you who the AMA's primary constituency was?
The AMA's primary constituency? It's member.
Object to the form, it assumes there is a constituency.
Well, did they ever tell you who their primary constituency was?
It was taken for granted. The AMA is made up of 240,000 physicians at the time I went
Medical
there.
physicians? Is it a trade association for medical physicians?
No, it is not. It's a professional organization.
All right.
It is not a trade association.
What's the difference?
I'll let you answer that one. I'm
All
sorry.
right. All right. Will you adopt my answer?
No.
All right. Mr. Taylor, if you had it to do all over again, would you make any changes in your actions while you were employed at the AMA?
I'll object to the form, relevancy.
I have no regrets.
Do you regret that you didn't contain and eliminate chiropractic?
I regret that we lost by default. We didn't lose because we didn't weren't a better opponent. We lost by total default, financial default.
All right. Do you think you were successful in containing chiropractic?
I think we were definitely on the road to containing chiropractic.
Do you think you impeded the growth of chiropractic by your actions?
I don't think there's any question that we did, but that we did.
Okay. In what manner did you impede the growth of chiropractic?
Just the exposure of the falsity of taking examinations, just the exposure of the falsity of the premise on which chiropractic is based, the harm done to patients, such as the California case or the Florida case and that sort of thing.
Did you impede?
Let me finish the answer, please.
Oh, okay.
I could go on forever. This is, you're talking about 11 years of my life.
I understand that. Did you impede the growth or the improvement in chiropractic educational institutions?
I have no idea.
Did you try to?
No. I doubt very much they had the ability or financial wherewithal to do it anyway.
Okay. If you had it to do over again, do you think you'd might be wise to visit a chiropractic college?
No.
Do you think it might have been wise to go to a chiropractor's office and find out whether or not they were massaging backs?
No. I wouldn't risk my life in a chiropractor's hands under any
Excuse
circumstances.
me, I didn't say you had to have an adjustment. Just go
You
and
said-
watch.
I have no regrets. I don't want to know any chiropractors, professionally particularly.
All right. I have no further questions.
I have some questions. I'd like to take a break, and that will facilitate my
Sure.
questions.
We'll go off the record at
4:51.
4:51. We're back on the record at 5:28.
Mr. Taylor, my name is Doug Polk. I represent the American College of Surgeons, and I have just a few questions. You testified that at some point you believed the American College of Surgeons had adopted some sort of policy statement on chiropractic. Do you recall when that statement was adopted?
It was considerably later than the original batch of endorsements and policy statements that were issued in 1966 and early 1967. If you can tell me when Ronald Hanlon came to the college, I might be able to better pinpoint when the statement was made.
Well, you testified that Dr. Hanlon, that you had certain conversations with Dr. Hanlon concerning chiropractic. Was Dr. Hanlon director of the college at that time, at the
I
time
think-
of your conversations with him?
Yes, it was. He was.
Did you have any conversations with Dr. Hanlon prior to his becoming director of the American College of Surgeons concerning chiropractic?
I did not. I did not know Dr. Hanlon prior to his coming to the college.
Do you have personal knowledge of when Dr. Hanlon became director of the American College of Surgeons?
Sometime around 1970 or approximately that.
Do you recall precisely the substance of the statement adopted by the American College of Surgeons?
I'm sorry, Mr. Polk, I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I have no further questions.
Mr. Taylor, I know that you were deposed for about 5 days in 1978, and I'm going to try to avoid covering the gambit of topics that were covered during that deposition, although it may be impossible to do so, because what I'm going to try and do is confine myself in my questions here to that which you discussed with Mr. McAndrews today. Let me ask you, when did you first become an employee of the American Medical Association?
January 1st, 1965.
And when were you last an employee of the American Medical Association?
Technically, the office closed on May 5th, 1965. I remained on the payroll for a couple of months or more after that.
I think you said... Yeah, thank you. I think you said 1965. Did you mean...
I'm 1975.
Okay.
Thank you.
When did you last work physically at the AMA?
Whatever day that was, I can't remember whether it was May 1st or May 5th. that the decisions were made to close a number of departments at the AMA for financial reasons.
And would you stand on your testimony back in 1978 as being testimony on that question that is more likely to be accurate
Yes.
because it's closer in time
Yes.
to the actual occurrence? Prior to your coming to the AMA participated in several Quackery conferences, did it not?
I'm not sure how many, one or two,
National
national
Quackery.
congresses.
And Mr. McAndrews asked you a couple questions about those?
Yes.
And did you learn about those Quackery congresses during the first several months that you were at the AMA?
Well, I would say within the period of the first 6 months, at least, I would have known that there was that the AMA sponsored a national congress.
Who sponsored the first national conference on Quackery?
The AMA and the United States Food and Drug Administration were co-hosts.
And what was inherent within co-hosting that conference?
Organizing the program, making all of the arrangements for the location. I believe the first one was held in Washington. That was prior to my coming to Chicago.
Objection, personal knowledge.
I believe the second one was in Chicago, again, co-sponsored by the American Medical Association and the United States Food and Drug Administration.
When was the first national conference on Quackery?
I believe in 1964.
When was the second national conference on Quackery?
I believe in 1965.
Was there a third national conference on Quackery?
Yes.
And who sponsored that?
The American Medical Association and the National Health Council.
Was there a fourth national conference on Quackery?
Yes.
Who sponsored that?
The American Medical Association and the National Health Council.
What's the National Health Council?
The National Health Council was, and presumably still exists, is an organization of allied health organizations. I believe there was, at the time when I was at the AMA, they numbered 68 organizations. They held a national meeting each year with very, very prominent speakers. Their prime motive, as I understood it, was to bring to the public's attention the principal health problems of the people.
Now, you attended the third and fourth national conferences on Quackery.
I did.
Did you attend the second?
I'm not certain.
Were there participants, were there attendees at the third and fourth national conferences on health quackery from various units of the federal government?
Yes.
From what such units?
Food and Drug Administration, Post Office Department, numerous HEW participants from various agencies within HEW, such as the Food and Drug Administration. I'm sure there were others. But I can't remember. If I had the list, if I had the program, I could tell you who.
And how was it determined that a particular person or set of people attended these conferences? Were they invited? Did they get a brochure, or what?
They were invited and were given a brochure which indicated where, when, and what the planned program was for that health congress.
What were the topics of the third national conference on quackery?
Excuse me just a moment. You used the term health congress. I believe you did. Is that different than the quackery
Congress?
congress?
I don't mean it to be, and I'll stand corrected, and I thank you. Let me show you what has previously been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 3268. And and it purports to be papers from the Third National Congress on Medical Quackery. And if I called it something else, I didn't. There was no significance to my calling it something else. Let me show you Exhibit 3268, and let me ask you if that refreshes your recollection as to the topics covered by the Third National Congress on Medical Quackery.
It does.
Would you tell us what they were, please?
Ronald Deutsch was is one of the country's leading writers on nutritional and food problems.
Just the topics, please.
Nutrition, drug and device quackery, obesity, a growing problem, why people go to quacks, the Corbiazin story, is cancer quackery dead, mental health and psychological counseling, literature and advertising, the costs of quackery.
What were the topics of the Fourth National Congress on Health Quackery? And to refresh your recollection, let me show you what has previously been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 3269.
Drug and device quackery, nutritional quackery, the healthcare imposter, combating quackery, the weapons, enforcement, and education, cosmetic quackery, mental health quackery, quackery and business, international quackery, quackery and the law, science and chiropractic, an eyewitness view of chiropractic, quackery in review.
I didn't mean to be incomplete as to the Third National Congress. Let me show you the second volume of these papers, and let me ask you if chiropractic was a topic of the Third National Congress.
Chiropractic was a topic. Medicine and chiropractic, a survey of chiropractic, chiropractic slide film documentary.
Now, you have testified that you practiced law in Iowa for a while before you began, or while you were working for the Des Moines Register-Tribune. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you were, or perhaps are, licensed to practice law in the state of Iowa.
I am.
And have you ever attempted to gain licensure to practice law in Illinois?
I was encouraged to do it. It was suggested to me that probably reciprocity would work, but I said I didn't see any need to do it, and I did not do it. I'm not licensed in Illinois.
Now, while you were director of the Department of Investigation, your activities were based in Chicago, Illinois, were they not?
Yes.
Did you practice law in Illinois while you were director of the Department of Investigation?
No.
Would you tell us your duties and responsibilities as director of the Department of Investigation of the AMA, please?
Protecting the public health was the short version of the overall goal, mission, whatever, of the Department of Investigation. I can break that down if you'd like into
Please do.
a variety of... that would range from psychic surgeons in the Philippines, face peelers in Florida, the alleged cure for cancer in Tijuana, the cure being identified as lateral. The very dangerous use of DMSO, the arthritis quackery that was practiced in Juarez, Mexico, in which three Louisiana residents died as a result of the so-called medication that was given by those three people in a Mexican clinic to monitoring the problems, complaints, etc., regarding physicians who were or were not members of the AMA. they were treated equally if there were questions about the propriety of their care, their ability. We either referred it to the proper authorities or handled it ourselves. If it were involved crimes, it would go to the police, which is illegal prescription of drugs. We'd go to the FBI if it were interstate shipments. All of the broad field of practitioners such as naturopaths, naturopaths, chiropractors, and there are numerous others. For example, in this state in which we are sitting today, they license palmists, they license those who read your head.
Here in Arizona.
In Arizona.
Excuse my interruption.
They license anybody who wants to pay a license fee, almost.
Now, among your duties as director of the Department of Investigation, were you responsible for bringing quackery to the attention of the public?
Our primary goal, as I said, was to protect the public health, and in order to do that, we thought we needed to educate the public on what harm was or could be done by health quackery or health quacks.
And in furtherance of educating the public, did you and the Department of Investigation cooperate with Ralph Smith in providing him access to background materials relating to various aspects of quackery?
Yes, Ralph Lee Smith was a very trusted freelance writer, trusted by the profession and by us.
And did Mr. Smith write various articles that were published in the AMA's publication Today's Health?
Yes.
Let me show you Exhibit 2005J, Defendant's Exhibit.
Is that new?
No. All of the exhibits that I am going to show Mr. Taylor, including the ones that I've shown him thus far, have been marked either at the trial, the first trial in this case, or at various depositions. In fact, the ones I'm going to use with him have been, insofar as you haven't used them, I think they're all marked at the first trial. I may use a couple that you've already used with him. 2005J purports to be a reprint from Today's Health, June 1966, entitled The Face Burners. What is Exhibit 2005J?
This is an article on the face peelers, face burners. The two terms were essentially synonymous. It was the use of acid to remove wrinkles from a patient's face in order to appear younger, the patients usually being female. This was a totally unregulated practice, flourished in Florida to begin with and then spread to other areas.
As director of the Department of Investigation, did you do some investigating relating to the practice of face burning?
Face burning no longer exists. It went the way of all things that are exposed properly. I'm not sure that any regulatory body ever passed any law that said you could not use carbolic acid to take the wrinkle off of Mary Smith's face. But the publicity killed it, and the pictures such as were used with Ralph Lee Smith's article contributed to that killing of that practice. It no longer is, as far as I know, is practiced anywhere in the United States.
Exhibit 2005K is an article from Today's Health, or it purports to be, printed in April of 1968, entitled The Incredible Drown Case. What is Exhibit 2005K? It's also by Ralph Lee Smith, I believe.
It is by Ralph Lee Smith, and this is by coincidence, Ruth Drown was a chiropractor who could do almost anything with a black box, and in Los Angeles, technically Torrance, California.
And did you investigate the Ruth Drown case?
Yes, we did.
The reports of your investigation are contained in this article by Mr. Smith.
Yes.
As Exhibit 2005M, an article from Today's Health, October 1965, entitled The Bunk About Health Foods. What is Exhibit 2005M, Mr. Taylor?
It is an article by Ralph Smith that attempts scientifically, and I think quite successfully, to warn the people of the danger of food fads, diet fads, and all of the things that were just in their infancy in 1965.
Did you investigate the bunk about health foods?
That was consistently a part of the problems that we faced, as well as one other department of the AMA that dealt with food.
As Exhibit 2005O, an article from the February 1966 Today's Health entitled A Phony Fountain of Youth by Ralph Lee Smith. What is that exhibit, Mr. Taylor?
This is a Romanian doctor by the name of Anna Aslan, who developed a potion. I can't call it a drug.
But this is a medical physician.
She was a medical physician in Romania.
Excuse my interruption. Please go ahead.
The potion was, in fact, used by a couple of characters on the West Coast. It purported to be able to restore, like the old monkey gland case. It was the restorer of youth, and they were using parts from slaughtered lambs. If you had a bad liver, they would inject ground up pieces of the liver of a lamb into your liver. Presumably that restored your liver and gave you the fountain of youth again.
And did you investigate this practice?
Yes, in fact, she came to the AMA. I have visited her with her personally.
Exhibit 2005P is from the December 16, 1965, The Reporter magazine, entitled The Vitamin Healers. Would you tell us what 2005P is, please, Mr. Taylor? What are the vitamin healers?
The vitamin healers are those health food stores which deal almost exclusively in vitamins as a cure-all for almost any human ailment. And this was an exposure of excesses of vitamins, other health foods, particularly as those vitamins and health foods concern two of the biggest areas of health quackery, arthritis and cancer, because they are chronic, like the chiropractors look for chronicity.
Did you investigate the vitamin healers?
Yes, we did.
Exhibit 2005Q is from the October 1966 Today's Health by Ralph Lee Smith, once again, The Amazing Facts About a Crusade That Can Hurt Your Health. Did you investigate that crusade?
This is the National Health Federation. In my judgment, as a former newspaper editor, this is an expose of the National Health Federation, and the most accurate one that I have ever seen, written by Ralph Lee Smith. The National Health Federation opposed essentially anything that the medical profession stood for. And the patient was paying the price, and it was our duty to try to do something to at least let them know what the National Health Federation stood for. We believe that article did it.
As Exhibit 2005R, an article from Today's Health, October 1968, entitled Strange Tales of Medical Imposters by Ralph Lee Smith. did you investigate medical imposters while you were director of the Department of Investigation? Mr.
Not
Taylor?
only did we investigate them, it was one of the most fun things that ever was. The Baron Munchausen syndrome.
You're going to have to spell that for me.
Baron Munchausen, M-U-N-C-H-U-S.
E-N?
I don't know.
Okay.
Munchausen.
Just like it sounds.
Just like it sounds. Baron Munchausen syndrome is a person who thinks that he goes to a hospital and says, my shoulder hurts. I think it's fractured. They admit him, x-ray him, and he says, I need something to kill the pain. So he gets some potent drugs. And as long as they keep feeding him these drugs, which he wants, he stays in the hospital. But the minute they discover that there is nothing wrong with his shoulder, he disappears. He is a medical imposter, and they are by the hundreds throughout the Western world. England has a terrible problem with medical imposters. Not just drug seekers, but people who just go to a hospital and say, I'm very ill, I don't think I can walk, and just want a week's vacation in bed. And they get it. They are ill, and under the British system, they have to be taken care of, and they stay there for a week.
And you investigated these imposters.
Yes.
And what did you do when you revealed a medical impostor?
We would advise, of course, the authorities at the hospital, the authorities and the law enforcement agencies in Chicago, if it were it happened in Illinois, and it happened all too frequently in Illinois because Chicago is a large metropolitan area and is subjected to this sort of thing. But otherwise, we would notify the State Medical Society, we would notify the hospital what had happened to them, that this man was in our files as an imposter. Sometimes police literally would prosecute. I think I would be safe in saying that dozens of them have been prosecuted for fraud perpetrated on the hospitals.
As Exhibit 2005S, an article from December 1968 issue of Today's Health entitled Scientology, Menace to Mental Health, also by Ralph Lee Smith. Let me ask you a couple of quick and concise questions about that. Did you do some investigating of Scientology?
Yes.
Did you give Mr. Smith access to some of the Department of Investigation files relating to Scientology?
Yes.
Have there been allegations that the compromise of the Department of Investigation documents, to use a term that Mr. McAndrews has used, has in some way been related to Scientology?
Yes.
As Exhibit 2006A, an article by Ralph Lee Smith from the June 1968 Today's Health entitled A Golden Touch for Chiropractors. Is Exhibit 2006A, the article by Ralph Lee Smith relating to his attendance at the Parker Practice Building Institute that you and Mr. McAndrews discussed
Yes.
not a very long time ago?
This is an excellent article, in my judgment, of what was going on at the Parker Practice Building course. I just wish that everybody who wants to know about what chiropractors are trying to do or were trying to do and what they were being told to do could read this article on how they could get rich in a hurry by, for example, and I'll just use one, when you show the patient the x-ray, be sure you make the marks on the x-ray where you show him where your patient, where the subluxation is, with a grease pencil, so you can rub it off as soon as the patient has left your office.
Did the Committee on Quackery discuss the topics that are the subjects of these articles that were written by Mr. Smith and that you and I have just discussed?
Discussed them with the staff at length and what we were doing with them and how we were able to get these things accomplished.
As part of your duties as the Director of the Department of Investigation, did you cause various pamphlets to be compiled and distributed?
Yes.
Is Exhibit 2005A, which is entitled What They Say About Chiropractic, one of those pamphlets?
It is.
Would you tell us what Exhibit 2005A is, please, Mr. Taylor?
This is a compilation of some of the, a very few, I could count them and tell you there may be 20 or 25, statements of policy critical of chiropractic by various governmental, private, and other types of organizations, ranging from the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, American Public Health Association, the Task Force on Medicaid and related programs, AFL-CIO, Consumer Federation of America, National Council of Senior Citizens, the United States District Court, and an affirmation by the United States Supreme Court of the England case, the American Hospital Association, the Association of American Medical Colleges, Health Insurance Council, the Health Insurance Association of America. I have just read a sampling of what's in the pamphlet.
Now, this pamphlet contains a couple of statements, the one by the American Hospital Association in particular, which on its face purports to be from a January 14, 1970 letter from the American Hospital Association to the Ways and Means Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives. And the one from the Association of American Colleges, medical colleges that is, also purports to be an excerpt from a letter of January 26, 1970 from that association to the Ways and Means Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives. What was happening before the Ways and Means Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives that
They were
resulted in these letters?
They were being bombarded and literally were trying to figure out how to face up to the chiropractic demands that they be included under Medicare.
Now, the question of the existence or non-existence of Medicare as a federal statute was considered by Congress in the mid-1960s. Is that correct?
Right.
And it was enacted in the mid-1960s.
Yes.
Some of the organizations listed in Exhibit 2005A lobbied Congress relative to Medicare in the mid-60s. Is that correct?
I think some of the strongest proponents of Medicare that went to Congress are represented in these groups in this pamphlet entitled What They Say About Chiropractic, to identify just a couple. The AFL-CIO, Nelson Cruikshank of the AFL-CIO, who was the Social Security Director of the AFL-CIO at that time, debated the President of the American Medical Association on numerous occasions.
Was that Dr. Annis?
That was Dr. Annis.
Excuse me, please go ahead.
The Consumer Federation of America was not exactly a friend of the AMA at that time. It was a lukewarm supporter of the Medicare. I do not lump them with the AFL-CIO, but the National Council of Senior Citizens certainly falls in the same category.
They were in favor of Medicare.
Strongly in favor of Medicare.
Excuse my interruption once again. Please go ahead.
Those are the principal ones. I'm sure there are others if we had the whole list here. But I think the strongest proponent of Medicare publicly, other than the members of the Congress, probably was Nelson Cruikshank
From the AFL-CIO.
from the AFL-CIO.
Now, the AMA in the mid-'60s was engaged, or did engage, in lobbying against the Medicare bill. Is that correct?
Did everything possible to avoid the passage of the Medicare bill and promoted in lieu thereof a catastrophic health care bill.
And when you say Mr. Cruikshank from the AFL-CIO debated Dr. Annis from the AMA, Mr. Cruikshank took the position that Medicare should be enacted, and Dr. Annis took the position that Congress should not enact Medicare.
In no uncertain terms.
And yet these same people who opposed the AMA position on Medicare were in agreement with the AMA position on chiropractic inclusion in Medicare. Is that correct?
They went beyond being just wanting to participate. They asked for help. What can we do? Send us the information. And we want to keep chiropractic out of Medicare. It has no business in Medicare.
Now, you have testified while being questioned by Mr. McAndrews about the adoption by some organizations of the AMA 1966 policy on chiropractic and of the adoption by other organizations of their own policies on chiropractic. Did the adoption of those policies have anything to do with the bills in Congress relating to chiropractic inclusion in Medicare?
They may or may not. I'm sorry. I don't know whether they literally had an effect.
But whether or not they had an effect was one of their reasons for
That's right.
for being for use during the legislative argument over inclusion of chiropractic in Medicare.
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Answer as best you can, please.
Not only for the inclusion of chiropractic under Medicare, but also for use in legislative problems at the state level. This pamphlet proved, I think, of value, at least I have been told by every state society that has commented on it, that this was a very valuable tool in their work in the state legislature in trying to contain chiropractic.
Mr. Hutton from the National Council of Senior Citizens has told you that the National Council of Senior Citizens used its statement against chiropractic in the legislative discussion. Did he not?
Objection, form, leading, and hearsay.
Well, at least as to the hearsay, I know that the plaintiffs contend that Mr. Hutton is a co-conspirator. And if there are no hearsay problems for a co-conspirator relative to the plaintiffs, I fail to see how that objection has any relevance as to the defendants.
No, I was under the impression that Nelson Cruikshank came from the AFL-CIO over to the National Council of Senior Citizens and met with Mr. Taylor. I think that's what the evidence shows.
So Mr. Hutton is not a co-conspirator.
No, Mr. Hutton is whatever his testimony says.
Okay. Read the question back, please.
Question, Mr. Hutton from the National Council of Senior Citizens has told you that the National Council of Senior Citizens used its statement against chiropractic in the legislative discussion, did he not?
He certainly did.
And how about Mr. Cruikshank?
Mr. Cruikshank did everything humanly possible, I believe, as an individual. And he had about as much clout as anybody I know in the area. Bill Hutton,
And Mr. Cruikshank's from the AFL, and Mr. Hutton's from the National Council of Senior Citizens.
Mr. Cruikshank was a Social Security Director of the AFL-CIO, and Mr. Hutton was editor and I'm not sure whether he was Executive Director of the National Council of Senior Citizens or what his title was. But for example, he called to tell me that he had seen some language that indicated there was the remote possibility that chiropractic might be included under Medicare. And he asked me how many copies of the Senior Citizens reprint we had left. And I said, whatever number we have, you can have. And he said, I want to bombard the Congress. We have to see right now. And my board will meet before the weekend, and our board will go to work on the Congress.
And did you write a memo to Mr. Hirsch regarding that?
I may have. I don't remember.
Let me show you what's been marked at your other deposition session.
I can't hear you.
Wait a second.
As plaintiff's,
Just a moment. I've got to turn on.
as plaintiff's Exhibit 212, it purports to be a memo from you to Mr. Hirsch dated October 13, 1967. Does that refresh your recollection as to whether you wrote a memo to Mr. Hirsch regarding the conversation with Mr. Hutton that you just told us about?
Yes.
And does that Exhibit 212,
He had called an emergency meeting in Washington next Monday and Tuesday.
and you're reading from that exhibit? is
I'm
that
reading from this exhibit.
Exhibit 212.
Right.
And does Exhibit 212 set forth the substance of your conversation with Mr. Hutton as you recalled it at the time you wrote the memo?
Yes.
Would you look again at Exhibit 2005A and tell us of your own knowledge what among those policy statements relating to chiropractic were used to try to convince Congress not to include chiropractic in Medicare? Just name the entities that promulgated those.
Obviously, the most important one was the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare and its publication, Independent Practitioners under Medicare.
Okay, just give us a list without establishing or attributing any important or degree of importance.
Task Force on Medicaid and Related Programs, National Advisory Council on Health Manpower, American Public Health Association, AFL-CIO, National Council of Senior Citizens, the American Hospital Association, probably the American College of Radiology, although I'm not certain.
And you were, strike that. You were shown Plaintiff's Exhibit 211 from the American Cancer Society. Was that policy statement on chiropractic used to try to convince Congress not to include chiropractic in Medicare?
If I didn't include it in the list that was used to inform Congress, I should have. It was an oversight on my part.
Well, in fact, it's in Exhibit 2005A.
Right. It was an oversight on my part. I should have included the American Cancer Society.
Okay.
Excuse me, just for clarity, are you saying that that particular document was prepared for Congress that he has in his hand?
Referring to, that wasn't my question. It may be what, it may or may not be what he
The way
said.
it came out.
Exhibit 2005A My question was, well, let's try it. Did you use this exhibit, 2005A, to try to convince Congress not to include chiropractic in Medicare?
I have a vague recollection. I'm sorry that I cannot give you a specific answer, but I have a vague recollection that there was a request from the Washington office of the AMA for 800 copies of what they say about chiropractic. And I assumed 800 copies meant they were to be distributed to the members of Congress.
Now, you discussed for a short time this HEW report relating to chiropractic with Mr. McAndrews. Who actually signed that HEW report relating to chiropractic?
Wilbur Cohen,
And he signed it in some capacity, did he not?
he was then Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare.
And did he render that report in fulfillment of some directive from Congress to make a report?
The charge to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was to make an unbiased, complete investigation of chiropractic to determine whether it should or should not be included under Medicare, or that is a paraphrasing of a long congressional edict given to Mr. Cohen and his department.
And before Wilbur Cohen signed that report, before it existed, were you or anyone else at the AMA contacted by the Department of HEW relative to background for that report?
I've testified that Dr. Southard came out and spent 2 days there, not only checking on chiropractic, naturopathy, and naprapathy, but some of the other things at Dr. Hudson's department.
Now, and what was Dr. Hudson's department?
Department of Medical Services.
Did Dr. Southard go anywhere else to collect materials, that is, apart from the AMA, to your knowledge?
I know only what he told me, that he was going to visit the American Chiropractic Association and headquarters and the International Chiropractic Association headquarters, and I'm sorry, I can't tell you the exact number. He either said 3 or 4 of the colleges and identified them. Among them were National and Palmer and Logan, because they were in the relatively close proximity to the Chicago area.
And when you say the colleges, you're referring to?
The so-called chiropractic colleges.
Thank you. While discussing the HEW report with Mr. McAndrews, you discussed an expert review panel.
Yes.
There were various expert review panels relating to various potential inclusions within Medicare.
I think there were 11 various allied services that sought inclusion under Medicare. This expert review panel was to investigate chiropractic, naturopathy, and naprapathy.
Now, all of these 11 expert review panels reported to whom?
An ad hoc committee, which was made up of, I will use my personal knowledge of the ad hoc committee that was over the expert review panel on chiropractic, naturopathy, and naprapathy. It consisted of between 20 and 30 of the leading citizens of the United States and represented everything from top business, economics, labor, that you could possibly find. And these people were responsible to see that the expert review panel gathered the information. And as I understood their mission was to review and accept or reject the expert review panel's report. In other words, they had supervisory control over the expert review panel. After they had concluded, if I may continue on.
Please do. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the
process.
for the process resulting in Mr. Cohen's rendering the report that he rendered.
After the ad hoc committee had, working with staff of HEW, with the expert review panel, in some instances, I would assume, at least, would then forward in at least draft form a report to the Secretary's office.
To the Secretary, Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Cohen's office.
Excuse me, go ahead.
It was, while I was not told directly who wrote the report, I know it was staff written. With multiple contributors, multiple editors, and direct and decisive approval by Mr. Cohen, who then instructed staff to write the covering letter to members of Congress. And that letter was held in abeyance until the report was in final printed form. That was a several volume, I think 3 volumes, report. One part of those 3 volumes was devoted to the report by those who were assigned to investigate and report back on whether chiropractic naturopathy or nephropathy should be included under Medicare. The same procedure essentially was followed for other allied health care services, such as optometry, for one. There were others. I'm sorry, my memory is not good enough to go back that far. We're talking about 1968.
Now, Dr. Southard told you in the letter that you discussed with Mr. McAndrews the structure of the report-making process. Is that
Right.
correct? And the end of the process was signature by Mr. Cohen.
Right.
And just quite generally, did the report of Mr. Cohen recommend that chiropractic not be included in Medicare?
I'd rather be very specific and say he recommended that it not be included under Medicare under any circumstances.
Now, you talked with Mr. McAndrews, or Mr. McAndrews asked you about the AMA's going to its friends during this process. Was Mr. Cohen a friend of the AMA at the time he recommended that chiropractic not be included in Medicare?
I don't think Mr. Cohen ever could have been put in the category of a friend of the AMA, nor could Nelson Cruikshank. I mean, prior to...
I'm sorry, we're talking about friend in the context of their agreeing or disagreeing with policy.
They totally disagreed with AMA policy on almost every turn. The AFL-CIO, National Council of Senior Citizens, Mr. Cohen was at times an embittered enemy of the AMA.
He disagreed with the AMA on legislative policy.
He totally disagreed on many, many items of legislative policy with the AMA. The AMA tried, I believe, to dissuade his appointment as Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare after his service of nearly a year as the acting secretary when the previous secretary had departed.
And he knew that.
Yes, and he was very aware of the AMA's opposition to his being appointed as Secretary of HEW. And yet he couldn't have been a happier man than when he saw the report. I have been told that he was just delighted. He signed it and said, get it printed and get it to Congress.
By the way, has chiropractic been included in Medicare?
In a very limited form.
Within how many years after Mr. Cohen recommended that it not be so included?
This 1968 was the independent practitioners report. That's the HEW report that recommended they not be included. I'm sorry, I don't know, 73, I think it was.
It certainly was included prior to your ceasing your employment with the AMA.
Yes.
Let's get back to these pamphlets without belaboring the rest of them. I'd just like to mention them. Exhibit 2005B appears to be a pamphlet entitled Health Quackery Cancer. Was this pamphlet prepared and distributed by you and your staff at the Department of Investigation?
It was, and with some assistance from the American Cancer Society.
Exhibit 2005C is a pamphlet entitled Health Quackery Devices. Was this exhibit prepared and distributed by you and your staff at the Department of Investigation?
It was, and again, with some assistance and participation by the Food and Drug Administration.
Exhibit 2005D is a pamphlet entitled Health Quackery Arthritis. Was Exhibit 2005D prepared and distributed by you and your staff at the Department of Investigation?
It was, and you might be interested in the fact that this pamphlet debunks the fact that you should go to Arizona to have your arthritis improved.
Exhibit 2005E, a pamphlet entitled Health Quackery Chiropractic. Did you and your staff at the Department of Investigation prepare and distribute that pamphlet?
We did.
Exhibit 2005F, a pamphlet entitled Did You Know That? And I believe it relates to chiropractic. Did you and your staff at the Department of Investigation prepare and distribute Exhibit 2005F?
This had considerable input also from the Committee on Quackery, particularly Dr. Joseph Sabatier. Dr. Joseph Sabatier, S-A-B-A-T-I-E-R.
Exhibit 2005I, a pamphlet entitled Facts on Quacks, What You Should Know About Health Quackery. Did you and your staff at the Department of Investigation prepare and distribute Exhibit 2005I?
We did. These are just a few examples of the areas of quackery that we dealt with from every day of the week, every week of the month, every month of the years that I was there. And before that, and since then, I'm sure.
I'm going to just cover in real brief form some short subjects here. You discussed with Mr. McAndrews the seeking of certification by the United States Office of Education of chiropractic school accrediting agencies. How many applied for such accreditation to the Office of Education?
How many organizations, how many different,
How many accrediting agencies?
oh, they would have as many as a dozen in a year.
And they were all seeking the one slot that the United States Office of Education had for certification as the accrediting agency for chiropractic schools?
No, as far as chiropractic is concerned, in the years just prior to 1975, to, let's say from 1965 to the 70s, both chiropractic organizations almost annually applied for recognition as an accrediting agency.
So
Generally, they would withdraw them rather than permit denial because they would be advised they were going to not be denied.
So the ACA and the ICA each had their own accrediting agencies,
That's what they wanted.
and each of them accredited different chiropractic colleges.
Yes.
And they both wanted to be the one recognized
Yes.
chiropractic accrediting agency.
Right.
Did each oppose the application of the other one?
They were certainly in juxtaposition, but whether they overtly opposed each other, I'm not certain. I know that each wanted to be the accrediting agency for chiropractic, and only its schools should be accredited.
And the AMA appeared on occasion before the United States Office of Education and presented materials and evidence in opposition to either or both of their becoming a certified
Yes.
accrediting agency. While you were being questioned by Mr. McAndrews, you really wanted to tell us about some statement by the heads of the workman comp boards for Idaho and Nevada. And Mr. McAndrews suggested that you might tell us about it while I was questioning you. This occurred at some meeting.
I was invited to speak to the,
Objection, hearsay.
Go ahead.
I was invited to speak to the County Medical Society in Las Vegas. I should know the county's name. I can't pull it from my memory at this hour of this late day.
Well, perhaps it would condemn us all if any of us are on the table near the county that Las Vegas is in.
And it's a very large medical society. Among the audience was the chairman of the Nevada State Workmen's Compensation Commission.
Do you know his name?
I do not recall his name. This was at least 15 years ago.
And did that person address you?
He not only addressed me, he stood up, introduced himself, and said, I would just like to tell you what's happening here in my state.
And what did he
And
say?
I wish you would tell me what to do about it. He said, I think the chiropractors are robbing the taxpayers. He said, we get 4 chiropractic claims for every medical for every one claim we get from medicine, and their claims are always higher in cost to the taxpayer than the medical claims. And Boise, Idaho,
Now, this is another
a
different meeting.
different meeting.
And would you describe that meeting to us, please?
Objection, hearsay.
I was a speaker at the, again, I'm not sure whether it's the State Medical Society meeting or, because Idaho, it does not have a very large state medical society, but it was, and I suspect that that's what it was.
Where were you?
Boise.
When was this?
I'd say about 1969 or 70.
And when was the Las Vegas meeting? Let's digress to that for a second.
At approximately the same time.
All right.
Same period, same time frame anyway.
At the meeting in Boise, did the head of the Workmen's Comp Board for the state of Idaho, did that person attend?
Yes, and...
What was that person's name?
And I'm sorry, I don't remember his name.
Did he or she address you? Was it a man or woman?
In both cases, they were men. In both cases, they were chairman of their state's Workmen's Compensation Commission.
And what did the fellow from Idaho tell you?
Objection, hearsay.
He said the most ridiculous claims that we get are spinal subluxations from chiropractors or low back pain caused by a subluxation. And we can't find out what they're talking about. The chiropractors are literally destroying the workman's. These are his words, not mine. And believe me, he said, are literally destroying the workmen's compensation facility in Idaho to the detriment of all of the people who are employed.
We'll go off the record at approximately 6:31 p.m.